One of the blessings of growing old is having the time to look back and to remember my stories and also the stories of our Saviors. Being part of our Saviors means I can help support mission work in distant places. It was a joy to help host the visits of missionaries that OSL has supported. Dr. Christopher Hartwig and his wife Rebecca worked in Tanzania. He traveled to 20 hospitals to help oversee care, and one of those hospitals was the Arusha Lutheran Medical Center. Presently, our Saviors supports Elizabeth Johnson, who teaches New Testament and to men and women who are studying to become pastors in Maiganga, Cameroon. She speaks a new and creative gospel promise to people immersed in the law. A story is told by Reverend Olin Sleto, a missionary supported by our Saviors in the Central African Republic from 1973 to 1989, along with his wife Connie, daughter of early members at our Saviors, Jean and Jeanette Helland. I think Jean was in the business office at Augustana College. This was long before I was part of our Saviors, but I love the story. Connie developed hepatitis B and was on the verge of death when she was picked up by a single-engine plane which took her to the nearest large airport to fly to Sioux Falls, and she was whisked off to Sioux Valley Hospital. One Sunday morning, the OSL pastor asked Connie's mother what they could do for Olin and Connie, who was now recovering from the hepatitis. Her reply was, "You could bring Olin and the children home." They were ages 4 and 9 at the time. An offering plate was passed to buy 3 tickets from Africa to Sioux Falls. The plate was passed, and as Olin writes, and these are his words, they had what they needed, some thousands of dollars for our 3 plane tickets. The next day we were on our way home, flying through Chicago to Sioux Falls. There are no words to express the emotion of that moment. The kids literally flew into Mom's arms, and by the time I got there, we simply fell into each other's arms and wept. Our Saviors has a long history of support for new refugees in Sioux Falls through Lutheran Social Services, and LSS continues to be part of our benevolence budget. The stories that I've heard go back to the Vietnam era when Ruth and Evelyn Berg, Ruth was a retired school teacher and Evelyn was a retired telephone operator. They helped with families escaping Vietnam. This meant securing apartments, tutoring in English, providing meals, and transportation to appointments. My first experience with these kinds of assistance started when I met Fred Stevens in the front of a Sioux Falls apartment building where 2 sisters from Liberia were entering life in America. Fred and Shirley gave assistance for years to several families, and they recall orienting refugees to their first use of an American stove. And they also recall standing by one of the refugees in Hy-Vee where they had to assure her that there were no live chickens that were sold here. Later, Barb Iverson and I, along with an LSS caseworker, met an Ethiopian man coming from a refugee camp in Somaliland where his wife had died, leaving him with 3 boys. He carried an infant off the plane, and a 3-year-old and a 12-year-old followed behind. Dee and Dave Knutson became their friends, providing hours of mentoring, transportation, assistance with sports and school enrollment, and employment. The 3 boys enjoyed Vacation Bible School here at Our Saviors during several summers. And later, Wayne and Sonia Hughes assisted another Ethiopian family with the countless challenges of resettlement. Many of these relationships lasted for years after the initial commitments that were expected from or asked for by Lutheran Social Services. The Knutsons, again with Carol and Floyd Prouty, met a Cambodian family who were Chinese in origin, and they had walked miles through the killing fields in the dark of night to a refugee camp before they made their way to Sioux Falls. They were tutored in language and customs and then helped along in the job search, eventually becoming successful restaurant owners in Sioux Falls. Paul Chicola and Jill Stoffenfischer, now saints at rest, along with Jill's daughter Beth, loaded their vans with Liberian refugees to bring them to worship at OSL. Some of the Liberians seemed more traumatized than others, having seen family members murdered in front of their eyes during the civil conflicts. Arnie and Becky Osmondson provided support and transportation to a later arriving Liberian family. Support sometimes meant court appearances where someone with English language skill was needed, occasionally paying a bail-out money to help stabilize a family, or as with Joan Negebauer, working restaurant shifts for an Afghan refugee family starting a business. Because the number of refugees has been reduced by our government, LSS has needed less support from OSL in these later years. Generous donations of furniture for 3 or 4 apartments, each in different years, were offered and were stored at no cost, thanks to Jan Sherman. One of the last families we helped came from, they were Bhutanese, and they came from a refugee camp in Nepal, where they were suffering discrimination in employment opportunities. This family is now they're now homeowners, and their 3 children have all had post-high school education. Jesus is the vine, and we are the branches, but not a lonely single branch, part of a community of forgiven sinners, freed to help our neighbor by Christ. We don't have to pay so much attention to our fruit, which springs and grows from our rootedness in the vine. But sometimes it is meaningful to pause and reflect on what we are able to do as a community of faith.